Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Today we're going to take a closer look at some of the dev interviews that happened on release day or that were kind of published on release day. I think essentially what happened was they invited a bunch of journalists, games journalists, to come see a presentation, and then they all wrote articles that they would release on release day. And each of them has a few different tidbits that I think are interesting and could give us some clues as to about what kind of characters are going to be released in the future of the game, and kind of game modes, and what direction they are planning on taking the game. One of the first things to note, though, is that there's this big sort of thread through all of the interviews, and that is they really focus on the what-if storytelling. So if you pay attention to the story in the campaign, which I don't, I kind of blow past it, you essentially see that there's the shadowy figure, and that you, the character, you get to control characters via your ring that kind of does space-time travel stuff. And they're kind of using that creatively to come up with different scenarios for different characters. What if they had made this decision differently in big turning points? I think they want to do that down the road. So we'll first dive into this GameRant interview. I'll post all the links in the description below. We got Feely and Keely here. But one of the things I wanted to pick out of this particular interview is, talking about how Frodo's a ring bearer, and then, what if there are other ring bearers? So this is one of those what if scenarios. Okay, well, what if some other character, perhaps in the Fellowship, could you have a ring bearer faction? What does that mean? And that they are kind of designing along that. He says that they're not telegraphing, but that kind of seems like a logical thing that you might include in the game later on. I do hope that they one day have like a bunch of different fan favorite characters, so you can kind of throw them all in a squad together. I know that's kind of one of the silly things you can do in SMEAGOL, right? Is you can have like a full team of Han Solos or a full team of Chewbacca's. I would really love a full team of like Golem or Smeagol or whatnot. I think that would actually just be a lot of fun. That would be something I would invest a lot of my resources in. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. One of the things I also wanted to talk about for this kind of what-if design of the game is that I think down the road, this is going to have an effect on unlock requirements for legendaries. So what I mean by that is that it's not just going to have to pertain to canon or lore. They can essentially come up with one of these what-if narratives and say, oh, well, you need these characters because we have a narrative that we made up to unlock sort of these legendary characters. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think it keeps everybody on their toes, so that it's harder to speculate on what exactly the unlock requirements are, and we all know that they tell you way too late unless you're going to spend money. The other thing is, I think people feel really strongly about this anyway, right? There's a very strongly opinionated group of people who read the books, know the lore inside and out, and they want any sort of other media representation to be faithful to that, to be faithful to what Tolkien wrote. And there's another group of people who love to write fan fiction, who love to come up with these what if scenarios and kind of do that sort of thing. I don't really have a stake in the fight. I think I could kind of be convinced either way. I see the merits of sort of both sides. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how this plays out in the long run. And kind of whether if either of the camps of those people are kind of happy with the game. One other thing I wanted to point out in this particular interview is, I believe, right down here. Yeah. So they ask some kind of generic question, but then the game director, Nick, he talks about one thing they're very particular on: even if we make something strong, how do we leave room for it to be changed, unseated, or permutated in the future? Then we go through these steps again and again, and in the background of this, there are multiple rounds of balancing and rewriting, and he calls it the creative rock tumbler, so to speak. So the game director here came over from SMEAGOL, the same people whom, it's all CG, right? And I actually think that this is a good sign. I want to interpret this as a good sign, that they're very aware of power creep, and they don't want to kind of really scale up power such that, you come back to the game maybe after taking a little bit of break and your roster is just completely useless. I played both SWIGO and MSF, and I actually think SWIGO did a much better job of managing power creep. I haven't played in a while, so I don't know how it is recently, than MSF. I think MSF power creep was pretty bad. And so to me, this is a positive sign that this is something that they're taking into consideration, and it's not just, okay, we released a new set of characters, they wipe out every other single set of characters that you had previously, so they're not worth investing in as much anymore. You have to always be chasing that kind of the newly released characters. So to me, that's a pretty positive. That's a pretty positive thing. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is that this what if scenario, I think, could be kind of like MSF in their terms of how they release characters. I think it could be a combination of how they release characters in SWIGO and MSF. So they can do a marquee like they do in SWIGO, right, where you get to sort of play the character a little bit with a team that has synergy with it. You unlock some shards, and you get to play with the character for free. Nothing that's going to like unlock a legendary, right? But you get to sort of test out the character to see if this is something you want to invest in or something you like. And I think they can combine that with what they do in MSF, where they have these alternate sort of narrative, alternate timeline narratives that they do. I know Deadpool is a pretty big one in MSF. And I think that would be interesting if they can kind of combine those. I will be interested in if they can work that into character releases in these what if scenarios. So that's it for this particular interview. Let's move on to their launch trailer. All right, I'm just going to show you one frame, and it's this frame right here. I don't know who this guy is. I mean, I think it's either Gandalf or Saruman, but I can't tell because they don't have any like resemblance to the actors from the movies, so it's really hard for me to tell. The purple orb makes me think it's Saruman, but there's like a bunch of orcs and Uruk-hai that are marching on him, or at least it seems like that sort of in the previous frames here. Maybe they're marching away from him, but I got the impression they're marching towards him. So let me know down in the comments who you think this is. I'm really not sure either way. I was wondering if this is maybe one of those things that they were playing into the what if, like, oh, well, what if this was Gandalf and he was the one who was kind of doing this sort of stuff instead of Saruman. But let's move on to the next interview, and this is the part that I want to point out here. What's the question? Feeling Keeley again? Okay, just talking about what if. So, what if Galadriel had taken the One Ring and become the Dark Queen? What if Smeagol hadn't? Who are the Nazgul if they had resisted temptations of the ring? Everybody kind of has their pick of what brings them out what do they like about this particular paragraph, right? Galadriel, Nazgul. For me, again, it's Smeagol. I really think it would be hilarious if Smeagol hadn't taken the ring, because then he's just Joe Blow, right? It's just Joe Smeagol. And like, how would they make a character out of that? I'm very curious to see what happens there. If they just have regular guy Joe Smeagol and they end up adding him, and then he becomes a part of the Smeagol Gollum team, and then we can use that, and you have a team up attack where everybody beats the enemy team like they're a fish on a rock. And I would just be very, very happy with that. Although I don't think that'll happen. And that's it for that particular interview. A lot of this stuff is shared across the interviews. Let's go to this particular one. This is one of the ScreenRant interviews. There's a number of them, and some of them have more information than the other ones. But the thing I wanted to point out in this particular one is, he's really interested in the First Peoples. This is the game director, Nick Reinhardt. A lot of the First Peoples, like the Numenorians, those were shown in the new Lord of the Rings show, how we can explore that. I've sat down recently and went through a bunch of the family trees for different characters. Okay, so this, and he says, yeah, like meeting your grandpa, haha, that would be super funny. And this got me thinking, kind of along the lines of what he was saying here, is I actually think that would be a really awesome, unique event in this particular game, right? Tolkien has all of these kind of family trees and branches, and I think if they can make an event based on those family trees, some sort of PvE event or character unlock event, that would be really awesome. I think that would actually, tickle a lot of people's fancy for scratching their Lord of the Rings itch, is using those expansive family trees that Tolkien wrote down, especially in the similar, I can never pronounce that word, the one that starts with an S, and making it into some sort of event. I think that would be really, really awesome. Okay, the last interview we're going to talk about here is the one that mentioned, this is sort of a shorter ScreenRant interview. It's the one that mentions that they're going to be adding some more powerful monstrous characters like trolls and giant spiders. I've seen some of the other videos from content creators, right, that they're talking about, oh, this means Shelob is confirmed. There's giant spiders, at least in the movies, they're just in the forest, right? So I'm not completely sure about that. I think Shelob being added would be really cool. And especially if they have some sort of faction. Like what faction does Shelob work with? Maybe the orcs or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I think this is one of the things that people really latched onto when they were reading these, was like, oh my god, this means that Shelob is confirmed. I'm not entirely sure about that, but we'll see. One of the other things they talk about in these interviews that I'm kind of just remembering is they talk about having a multi-squad PvP experience. And they don't really say whether that's across guilds, whether that's just you, or whatnot. So I imagine that could be some sort of battle arena mode. Think like Grand Arena Championships, right? Or just Grand Arena from SWIGO, or Alliance Wars or Territory Wars. From MSF and SWIGO, respectively. I think that is coming in the pipeline, and I'm pretty excited for that too, as well. I think they really got to work on some of the bottlenecks in the game right now. I think I'm gonna make a separate video, especially about the gold crunch bottleneck, because CG Hamo basically in the Discord was, said, okay, she pushed back to the development team and said, this is a real serious issue. I'm feeling it myself, and we need to do something about that. And then, they've been releasing some offers that have sizable amounts of gold in them, which we hadn't really seen before. I'll talk about that in another video. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but these interviews kind of are really a little peek into what is possible and what is coming down the road. They mention that they probably have like 1 year's worth of content pretty solidly planned out, but 3 to 5 years and kind of, okay, we have a scaffolding, a structure of what we want to make this game. So I'm kind of curious for you guys, what are your biggest like what if characters that you would want to see in the game? I think it's pretty clear what I want, which is a team of Smeagol's and Golems. But let me know down in the comments below what you kind of want to see in the game, and thanks for watching.